Today, the U.S. government releases previously classified files related to unidentified flying objects.
The Pentagon releasing photos, videos, and reports of some 400 unresolved UFO sightings from the past 80 years.
Hundreds of images, videos, and documents. We'll talk about what they really reveal. I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode. Do you think this is all a big distraction by the Trump administration? Do you think this might get us closer to understanding whether or not extraterrestrials are real? Do you want to believe? And remember, if you're on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review and a 5-star rating as well. It really does help the show.
My name is Anthony Lappe. I am a television producer and investigative reporter based in New York City.
Okay, Anthony, welcome to The Take. So I'm going to jump right in with kind of the top line, the headline. On Friday, May 8th, by order of the President of the United States of America, the Pentagon, aka the Department of War, released its first tranche of previously classified material regarding what I think most people call UFOs, but what experts like you might call UAP, unexplained aerial phenomena. The official site is war.govs/UFO, and it's now live. And it's being branded as something called PURSUE, the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. So now, of course, this being the Trump administration, the site opens with this personalized message from the president. And in that message, he directly references aliens and extraterrestrial life. So Anthony, we're going to dig into the details in just a moment, but there's just, in broad strokes, as someone who has covered this stuff for years, how extraordinary is it to have a commander-in-chief using this kind of language and directing this kind of multi-agency project?
You know, we live in strange times, but even by the standards of 2026, this is a pretty wild moment for the President of the United States to explicitly mention alien and extraterrestrial life with a sort of implicit acknowledgement that these videos and these documents are related to the disclosure possibly of some kind of contact with alien extraterrestrial life is absolutely wild, in my opinion. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in the history of the UFO story.
So this release contains 162 files dating back decades. It includes documents from the FBI, the Department of State, the U.S. Space Agency, NASA. So you are an investigative journalist and someone who I would say is at least connected to this broader UFO community, which is a very small but a very dedicated group. So who is this release for? Because I know that there's a lot of frustration within that UFO community about the way these files and images are being rolled out.
Yeah, I mean, so you start with the headline, which is wild, as I said, where you have the President of the United States talking about alien life. But then when you crack open this website, and what you see there is a very highly curated tranche of documents and videos and photos, many of which are out there. They're not new. They're buried in NASA files or they're documents that you can find on the CIA or the FBI's website going back years. And then when you start looking at each individual photo or video, we see that same issue that you see again and again with the UFO investigation writ large, that each individual thing in and of itself, each individual data point is very hard. It's really, I use the analogy of a mirage. The closer you get to it, you try to get close and then it just kind of dissipates. So I think for a lot of people who are very involved in the UFO community, you've already seen this over the weekend. The reactions to this dump have been frustration, have been people just yearning for something stronger, more conclusive, less blurry.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, and they're claiming this is just the beginning. So it's almost like a trailer, for the movie that's coming.
Yeah, I think that's really good. The trailer, I'll wait till you see what's coming next. And then you add to that this sort of haphazard way that they release the files without a lot of context. There's no narrative. I heard one YouTuber say this is like a sales rack at TJ Maxx or TK Maxx in the UK.
I think that might be how to view this website. It's the TK Maxx of UFOs. There are some bargains and some amazing finds to be had, but you're going to have to dig for it, and you might have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to make a comparison to the Epstein files release. A lot of critics are saying it's something that they call in the intelligence community a limited hangout, which is controlled release of information or documents or some sort of thing that feels like transparency. And I think the other important thing, I think there's no story that's being told. There's no reason or rationale why this document was released or why another document wasn't. So it raises a lot of questions.
And it seems like it's by design. It's not providing answers. It's providing like a research project. In a Truth Social post, Donald Trump, he said, while previous administrations have failed to be transparent on this subject, with these new documents and videos, the people can decide for themselves, all caps, what the hell is going on? Have fun and enjoy. He said this in a Truth Social post. I mean, why is the burden of proof on the public here? Why aren't they just giving us the answers? Why do we have to figure it out on our own like it's like a cold reader?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, right? Because if you also look into the context of what's happening right now in the United States with this administration, which is hitting all-time lows in approval ratings. We've got another war in the Middle East that's dragging on, that he's increasingly being criticized for not being able to resolve. You have gas prices going through the roof. And then there's like this, decoder ring that's been sent out. It doesn't take a sort of intelligence insider to look at this and ask a question of whether this is some sort of a new just mass distraction that is being thrown at the American public.
Okay, so we have sort of built the anticipation here, and we've actually really lowered the expectations. But there are some things in here. Let's talk about some of the highlights. The one that I think is getting the most attention is a photo from the Apollo 17 mission from 1972. Can you talk about what we're seeing in this picture? It's like a black and white photo of the lunar surface. Why is it getting so much attention?
Yeah, well, the Apollo ones were really made me lean in, because that's, I think, there's always been a lot of myths around, especially the later Apollo missions, them the astronauts seeing weird things in the space. There's also, been lots of lore around, in particular, astronauts who came back believing that they had seen something. So
really?
When I saw that Apollo 17 photographed, I really leaned in and was like, wow, that's a really interesting thing. I had never
describe
seen
what it is, just for the people who are listening.
So it's a photograph taken from the lunar module from the moon's surface up into the sort of space night sky, that shows 3 points of light that, when you look at it, appear to be could be some sort of 3 points on some sort of craft or body. But once you start kind of looking under the hood and researching a bit, like, what is that document? Where did it come from? It appears that this is actually a photograph that has existed in the NASA system for years. There's a giant, very high-res version of it that you can actually find on NASA's own website. It raises the same questions that you get a lot about any kind of, in particular, UAP or UFO photograph, is the lensing and reflections. So, the lunar module, was they were taking photographs through a small window from a lighted module shooting into the darkness. You don't have to be a photographic expert to know that can create all sorts of interesting effects in the lens. The other thing that was interesting, what they published, were some transcripts from the astronauts from the flight to the moon that are also really interesting. They talk about seeing bright fragments and shapes and things that were lighting up like the 4th of July. It was one of the quotes from one of the Apollo astronauts. One of the astronauts, Gene Cernan, described seeing a rotating, flashing object that said it appeared to be physical and in the distance. Those are really interesting. And, and some of those experiences, led some of these Apollo astronauts allegedly to believe that they were seeing things that weren't sort of debris from the booster rockets or ice or other things coming off the module. So those are all really interesting data points.
Another image that's getting a lot of attention is this video that's labeled from somewhere in the Middle East. It's from the 1st of January, 2013. And it looks like it's like this image from the sky, and there's an object that is moving around with contrails, and it's moving at odd angles. But then you clearly see, like from the left side, it's trailing a parachute. And I saw one expert on YouTube kind of exasperated, saying like, this isn't a UFO. This is a fan with a parachute attached that's hurtling to the earth.
There's probably a drone. It's unlikely that we were seeing anything like a genuine alien UAP.
Yet it's being played on like morning shows and everything when these stories come out.
Infrared footage from the U.S. military in 2013 shows a star-shaped object hovering in the sky above an unknown location as it leaves behind a white trail.
I mean, when the truth does come out about videos like this, do you think this does more harm than good?
This is a great example of how, a lot of people in the news media, don't want to let facts get, in the way of a great story or a great image. When that low-level associate producer is under pressure to get some cool video up for their, the next news hit, and how little kind of critical thinking goes into some of these releases.
Yeah, and how this rollout has led to that kind of confusion. I mean, what is that? I've been that associate producer who's looking for good video. It's not like they're giving us explanations. Okay, so Anthony, let's talk about the documents that are in here, because they might be actually more interesting than the images. How should we interpret like some of these memos from the late 1940s? Especially there's this one from 1947 about a flying saucer in Twin Falls, Idaho.
Well, these are sort of like some of the classics, right, in the UFO narrative lore, that go back to really the beginning of the UFO era, which maybe, let's say not coincidentally, began right as the Cold War was heating up.
Yeah.
The Twin Falls memo, the story of the first sort of flying saucer panic that happened in the United States, is really interesting, because there were these sightings of these strange objects that were flying, and then the flying saucer frame and phrase got kind of hoisted onto it by a local newspaper. And then that became sort of repeated again and again throughout the late 40s and 50s and into the 60s, this idea of the flying saucer.
But in this case, this is a newly classified memo from like a chief of staff who's actually talking about this, like a credible person mentioning flying saucers.
I mean, when you look back at the history of UFOs, there's highly credible people all the way up and down the food chain in the American military, even civilian aviation, absolutely convinced that they're seeing things that should not be flying the way they're flying. And I think that's to me one of the most intriguing parts of this story, why this story doesn't go away.
And then the Swedish example is crazy. I mean, it's like these are really serious people. They're seeing something crash into the water. They find this crater. They bring in the U.S. Air Force, and it's all here in these like official memorandum.
The Swedish one is very interesting, but also very much even more so wrapped up in what was happening during the burgeoning Cold War.
Yeah.
Right. You had very possible, credible counter explanations for all of this that that the Soviets might have got their hands on some captured V1, V2 rocket technology and were sort of doing early tests of, ballistic missiles over Sweden. And all this stuff has to be combined, right? With you're both testing technology, but you're also looking at the psychological effects of it. So for me, that smells much more like a test of Russian technology, and also an intimidation move by the Soviets to remind the Scandinavian countries that of their presence, of their technological prowess. So I think you have to always look at it through both the technology and the potential psyop, as it were.
And this is a good question for you because you've investigated this stuff. I wonder if we've been asking the wrong questions, because everyone just wants to know, are aliens real? But the question that I think you've been looking into and these documents are helping to reveal is, was there a cover-up? Was the government involved in an active cover-up for 50, 70 years? Are there things we're seeing in these new disclosures that are showing that NASA denials over the years are just not credible?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question, but I think even the third question is, what are they covering up? Are
Right.
they covering up secret weapons programs, but also just a larger psychological mass belief system that has been created that may be used to be dialed up and dialed down at different times? Or, as you bring up, is there an actual there? Is there actually a cover up of some sort of contact or with alien craft or aliens themselves? So that is the central question that is sort of like, for the first time, I think, in the history, in the 70 years of this narrative, is appears to be reaching some sort of, crescendo.
Yeah.
It's also being timed with a new Spielberg movie coming out about disclosure. And you have more and more high-ranking officials from both sides of the aisle, whether it's Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Christian Gillibrand, who's on the Armed Services Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. You have a former head of the CIA, John Brennan, John Podesta, and then a whole tranche of Republican, very MAGA-leaning members of Congress.
It's Anna Paulina Luna, Tim Burchett, and Eric Burleson, and they're all MAGA-aligned conservatives, very conservative, and they've all been praising the president. But this is not the first highly publicized disclosure of documents under Trump. From the release of the files related to the JFK assassination to the Jeffrey Epstein files, say what you want. These are two episodes that really fell short of expectations. Are we seeing any patterns there?
Yeah, I mean, the politics behind this has to be taken into context, that you have a president who ran on being transparent and then has been involved in all sorts of completely non-transparent operations, whether that's the insider dealings that are going on, inside the insider trading that's going on, to all sorts of other pardons that allegedly have been bought. There's all sorts of very non-transparent things happening within this administration. But when you look at JFK, Epstein, UFOs, these are very digestible brand name things that get people's attention. So I think you have to look at it through the political context here, that this is part of a larger branding operation that's going on that, will give the impression that this administration is releasing the truth to the public, where it's really a deflection from the so many other things that are happening behind the scenes, whether that's the dismantling of the EPA, to, as I said, insider trading, to giving away pardons, to, the list goes on.
So what's next? We've heard that the best is yet to come, that there are these 46 videos that Congressman Anna Paulina Luna has requested. What are you waiting to see that you think could possibly blow people's minds?
You know, having been involved in this story for almost a decade now, the idea that there's always something coming
Yeah.
is very familiar and very frustrating, but it also hooks you in
Yeah.
and it keeps you going. It's like it's like a soap opera. It's an ongoing narrative that there's just that one piece of video that we're going to get that's going to be definitive, or this one photograph. So like everyone else out there, I'm very excited to see and to hear about these 46 other videos that Congressman Luna has talked about. They're hyping them up a lot, so I think the expectations are going to be very high. But I think it's, we've kind of hooked everyone into this narrative, this storyline.
And do you think this kind of momentum could extend to other countries? I mean, do you think Russia and China could get in the mix? Because this isn't just aliens only can't exist in the western part of the United States. They would be a global phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it's always been very much an American story and an American narrative, which is a very interesting part of it, right? But it is a global story. You hear there are UFO sightings and abduction stories that have happened everywhere from Africa to the Russia to everywhere in between. So I think everyone wants to know the truth behind this, because honestly, it is the biggest story in the world,
Yeah, it is.
in the universe. I mean, if this is true, and only one thing has to be true, right, for it all to be true, just one of these videos,
Right.
and if they are, it will change our entire ontological understanding of who we are and in what humanity is and what our place is in the universe. So it's such an intriguing, fascinating, frustrating story to try to report on, but it's an exciting time.
All right. Well, I'm hooked. Anthony, thank you for coming on The Take.
Thank you so much.